Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library, and I am super excited to be here again with Travis Ireland talking about all kinds of whiskeys. But this time we're focusing on the 250th anniversary of the Revolutionary War, and he's going to be talking a little bit about the history of whiskey throughout American history. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting, but also he's going to be tasting at least 4 different whiskeys with us and talking about why he loves them. So before we get to him, I just want to say a couple things. Thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library. We could not do all of this fun stuff without them. I'd also like to thank Travis for letting us share this program with other libraries because of course, when libraries work together, we make magic. I'm just reading the chat where Barbara says she's reading a polar seltzer. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom screen. If I'm going to leave the chat opened during and after Travis's slides, so that because he has some questions for you. He wants to know what you're drinking. He also wants to know what you like and what you're learning. So I'm going to leave the chat open and feel free to let him answer his questions, chat with each other, things like that. I know some people find it distracting, so you can always turn the chat off on your Zoom. You'll still see the numbers that come up, but you won't see the actual chat. So, the red wine. Good. Awesome. And I think that's it. Travis Ireland, super excited, like I said, to be here, for him to be back. He was here with us in March talking about Irish whiskeys. He is the former host of Whiskey Podcast. You're probably like, well, who is this guy? I'm like, he's for the Whiskey Podcast, or was, so he knows of what he speaks. So if you're drinking with us, I hope you're 21 or over. And if you're not 21 or over, drink some water, have some soda. Travis, welcome back. So excited to have you here.
Nice to be back. Hopefully some folks are here that were at the St. Patrick's Day one. That was a really good time. I enjoyed that one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm actually really excited about this one. I'm actually watching everyone mentioning what they're drinking. And a couple of them are. I'm like, yeah, I like that one. All right. So Larceny Manhattans is one that caught my eye. Are you actually making like Manhattans right now?
We have a
That's
wide
pretty cool.
variety of drinkers in our audience.
I like that. And then the Crown Royal Blackberry, I actually had the Jack Daniels Blackberry. That one it's good. It wasn't anything I was expecting, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. That's always nice,
But
especially for somebody who drinks or tries whiskeys as much as you, just to find somebody that's something that surprises you.
yeah. Yeah, I'm not really into like the like flavored whiskeys like that, but I did enjoy it.
Hmm.
With that said though, I'm gonna kick us right into some whiskey tasting. So this evening I'm going to be enjoying Heaven Hill's first edition of their grain to glass rye. Um, put some information on the screen for everybody. So this one here is actually really, really tasty. I picked it up. Actually, I think I got this one up in Maine when I was up there for my niece's graduation. Um, so this one does come with some pretty solid flavors. Has anyone had this one?
I have not, and I'm looking into the chat. Um, Travis, when you pour a whiskey like that, do you just
Yeah,
dump it into a glass? I mean,
yeah. I have a little Glencairn right here.
mm-hmm.
So this is my tasting glass of choice is a Glencairn, but they come in all different shapes and sizes. But this is my preference. Yeah, and I pour it in and you can let it breathe for a little bit, which is what I normally do. Is why I'm having conversation. I kind of smelled it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, when you first smell it and it comes out, you get the really big punches, and for a rye, you'll get a lot of the spicy notes right up front. If you let it kind of set for, it doesn't have to be very long. I mean, some people will be like, let it sit there for, a couple minutes. For me, 30 seconds, maybe, and then you're good to have a drink of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of let some of the air get to it and let it kind of, get comfortable in the glass. Um,
Is there a
but I can
reason
already
that
tell it's changed. Sorry.
is there a reason that your glass is that shape?
So, well, it's actually for the air, the
Hmm.
airflow in the glass itself. So it's a little bulbous at the bottom and gives it a wider surface for the airflow in the glass itself.
Okay. I'm going to go off screen, Travis, so I won't bother
Yeah.
you and interrupt you anymore. But I did want to ask those two questions. Again, if anybody has questions, put them in the Q&A. I will moderate them after um, Travis's talk. But in the meantime, feel free to chat away with.
Yeah. So Heaven Hill is actually out of Kentucky. I did not. I did not add water. I actually prefer my whiskeys neat personally. Um, but I don't knock anybody for putting a little dab of water in there. They actually do make limestone water that you can get from Kentucky if you really want to be all like that about it. But I enjoy mine just straight. I don't mind a little bit of proof. Not too much though, otherwise it kills the tongue. All right. So everyone ready? Everyone have their whiskey in hand? All right. So let's talk about rye. So rye whiskey is actually the original form of whiskey here in America. It started in the mid 1700s once we had a lot of European immigrants. Primarily, it was Irish, Scots, and believe it or not, Germans. They had arrived here and they brought a lot of their distilling equipment. So if you were at my St. Patrick's Day presentation, you'll learn that there was the coffee still and there was the pot still, the coffee still, also known as a column still. That's actually primarily what was used here as they came over. Well, when they got here, barley wasn't the primary grain here in the States. It's actually where they were immigrating to, which was in the northern states. Rye was more prevalent. It was more adapted to that environment, and so growing rye as a crop for food would give them the best results for having additional crops, whereas barley wasn't necessarily around. So it became the primary, with main distilleries kind of starting in the Pennsylvania, Maryland area. So one of the things that happened shortly after the Revolutionary War was that uh, a rebellion happened. So President George Washington, after the Revolutionary War, was looking to fund the now solo United States of America. And one of the ways that he sought to do so was to actually put a tax on the production of whiskey. Of course, distillers revolted in mass, and they were refusing to pay that tax. And that's what became known as the Whiskey Rebellion of 1791. Interestingly enough, George Washington resulted in sending the National Guard to Pennsylvania to confront the protesters, which is actually the first time that the military was ever used in our newly found country. So many of those distillers rather fled. They headed south to the hills, and they kind of considered it a southern migration, if you will. And that really pushed America closer to that corn-based bourbon, and it laid the groundwork for some of that stuff that we like to call moonshine. Interesting fact about rye whiskey is, has anyone ever heard of Old Overholt? If you have, and you've had some, that's actually America's oldest continuously maintained whiskey brand, dating back to 1810. Now, you won't find it on the top shelf. It's generally at the bottom. Sometimes you can find it in the almost 1 gallon plastic jugs, but it's actually not a bad whiskey. I've had it myself. It's actually pretty good. Has anyone enjoyed that before? Had a chance? It is very cheap. It is very cheap. I think around here it's $25 or so. Excellent. Does anyone have a favorite ride they go to? I know that's kind of a I don't know. It's kind of a unique flavor because it's spicy. Bullet, okay. Dad's. I've never heard of Dad's Hat. Is there a main distiller for that? Is that like MGP? Pretty Lake. All right. Whistle Pig, not MGP. Okay. Awesome. Let's see. I like some of the. I've had Whistle Pig's Rye. I've had Bullet Rye. Bullet Rye actually makes a really, really good old fashioned. If you haven't had an old fashioned with Bullet Rye, and I'm assuming Crater Lake Rye is out of Oregon. Victorstown, Knob Creek. I have a bottle of Knob Creek myself. Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully you all are ready for the next one, because now we're getting into bourbon. So I selected Old Forester, the single barrel. I think I saw someone else had it as well. I don't remember. I think I saw it earlier on when everyone was hopping in. Redemption Rise, good. So this is the Old Forester single barrel strength. Um, this one is not super easy to come by, at least anywhere around me. I have not had much luck coming across this one. But if you do, and it's around that $80 range, I'd highly suggest picking it up. It's actually a very, very good whiskey. Um, so this one, if you are sipping on it, I'm in North Carolina, so I'm in a controlled state. So I have to ask nicely for them to give me stuff. So for this one, you'll get a lot of toffee. This one definitely has a lot of toffee, a lot of vanilla, obviously, as it is a bourbon, and it's lighter on that spice notes. So unlike our rye, you're not getting as much of that heavy spice. It's more like those lighter baking spices. It's very nice. Even at the higher proof, it's dry, but it really makes your mouth water. It's really good. It has all of the flavors that are kind of layered, or, put here with some of that darker cherries, a little bit of chocolate in there. Definitely baking spices are very forward with this particular one. And as far as that finish, it is very long. I'm still getting it, mouth still watering. Um, there's a lot of there's a like oakiness to it, which is nice. It's kind of what I would expect out of a good bourbon. If you're drinking bourbon and there's kind of like lays flat, um, I think it's usually because of age, where it's not aged down enough. All right. Does anybody have a favorite bourbon? Yes, Bullet Rye does make a really good Manhattan. Although I'm not sure I've ever had the Antica Formula Vermouth. Is Gentleman Jack? I mean, technically, Gentleman Jack would be a Tennessee whiskey, would it not? Widow Jane's good. Old Forester, obviously. Old Forester's great. Buffalo Trace, yep. I actually just finished my bottle of Buffalo Trace. I think someone requested it, and I got lucky and got a bottle. New Riff. I've heard a lot of really good things about New Riff. All right. No judgment here about not liking bourbon. E.H. Taylor, all right. Blanton's. Okay. If you like Blanton's, what is it? Woodford Reserve is actually a really good replacement and a lot cheaper. I have actually a bottle of Blanton's, I think, over here. I still haven't opened it yet. Yeah, Redwood Empire. I have a bottle of that stuff. Who is it? The Lost one. Lost Monarch, I think. Four Roses. All right. How about any Maker's Mark stands? I haven't seen that one pop up. Maker's Mark usually gets a little bit of. All right. Yeah, Maker's definitely they do some interesting releases, which I like. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but I know that they do a couple of really good annual releases. Weller's is also a good one. I do like a wheated bourbon, which is what Weller's are. I like Weller's because I think the wheat kind of cuts through that well, what can be harsh flavors. And actually, whoever said that they don't like bourbon, maybe give a wheated bourbon a shot if you can find one. They're pretty good. All right. I like everybody. I'll have really good. Well, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of both there, Carmen. It's more of like I'm just trying to get you guys involved in the conversation. So, the birth of bourbon. So after that whiskey rebellion of 1791, and we had that mass exodus of everyone who was refusing, all the distillers that were like, we're not paying that tax, which is fair. I mean, they just fought to get away from England and, paying taxes amongst other things, and then they get slapped with a tax uh, as a new nation. So I could understand their dissatisfaction with that. So the settlers and everything started moving down towards Kentucky and Tennessee, and they brought with them all of their distilling equipment, of course. Um, Granted, that's where a lot of the illegal distilling up in the mountains happened. If you have to get across the Smokies to get over into Tennessee and all that. So a lot of the illegal distilling took place there. But what was really common in this region was the ability to grow corn. So what like rye was there, but not as much as it was up in north, and corn was a much easier crop to manage down here. And so um, with that, they started producing the same thing. I do want to state that barrels had been used in storage of spirits for a long time. It's like about the 15th century, I believe, but it was never in practice to intentionally age uh, whiskey or any beverage in these charred barrels. So what happened is as they were starting to ship this corn-based whiskey in these barrels, it would begin to age a little bit. A lot of it would be making it down to New Orleans to kind of make its way out for export. Um, Now, Elijah Craig is actually considered the father of bourbon, if you will, as we know it in modern day. There's a couple theories going around. One of the popular ones is that he had a rick house, basically, or not a rick house, but he had like a barrel house thing. They didn't call it a cooperage back then, I don't think. That burnt down, and then he said instead of wasting the money, he still used the burnt scraps of the oak barrels, put them together, still loaded them up with whiskey. Ended up that it ended up aging them and making a great flavor. So he's kind of coined as being the father of modern bourbon, that aged bourbon, and the practice of putting them in new charred oak barrels. Um, Now, no one's really sure how bourbon got its name. So this is kind of one of those things where there's a couple different ways. Some people will say it's the Bourbon County. Some people say it's New Orleans for the Bourbon Street. I'm going to lean that it's probably closer to the Bourbon County, Kentucky. just because that's where corn whiskey really got going. As we know, Tennessee whiskey is basically bourbon with a slight twist. So I think that it would be fair to state if it was made in Bourbon County, um, that it probably got its name from there. There's also very specific laws that regulate bourbon. So in the United States, it's the only place where bourbon can actually be called bourbon if you produce it the exact way that it needs to be produced. So it has to be a mash bill of at least 51% corn. It can be distilled to no more than 160 proof, and it has to be aged in new charred oak barrels. When it's bottled, it must be at least 80 proof. There can be no additives, no flavors or colors. And for the bourbon to be referred to as straight bourbon, it must be aged for at least 2 years. Also to note on the age, if a bourbon is aged for less than 4 years, the aging duration must be stated on the label. So for anybody who's looking at age statements on their bottles, and you don't see anything on a bourbon, there's a good chance that it's older than that 4 years, because after 4 years, they don't have to make that statement. All right. Take another sip. Give me a moment. All right. So the bottled in bond. I think I saw someone in chat that liked Heaven's Hill bottled in bond. So the Bottled in Bond Act was passed in 1897, and back when the move happened, and there was distilleries popping up left and right, and people were making whiskey. There wasn't always the same quality. A lot of times you'd have that moonshine that was made up in the hills would be made with lead radiators, or it would be, produced incorrectly, and it was toxic to consume. And so a way for controlling this is the U.S. government passed this law called the Bottled and Bond Act, which guaranteed a standard for the whiskey that was being produced. So for qualification, the spirit had to be produced in one distilling season, either fall or in spring, aged for at least 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse, and bottled at exactly 100 proof without any additives. So that's what it takes and it doesn't have to be just whiskey. This should be stated like the Bottled and Bond Act was strictly for spirits, any distilled spirit. So if you had technically a rum, right? It's a distilled spirit, and they wanted to do the Bottled and Bond and put that label. As long as they were done and followed all of this stuff, they would be able to put the Bottled and Bond on their labels. So, question for the chat, because we're getting into the next bit: is Tennessee bourbon, or Tennessee whiskey rather, do you think it's a bourbon? Because if we go back one slide, right? So this one, I made mention that bourbon is not allowed to have any additives. So there's no additives, no flavors, there are colors that can be allowed. So does that make Tennessee whiskey a bourbon, or is it Tennessee whiskey is just its own thing? Be interested to see what you guys think. See, I'm under the impression that it is a bourbon. Okay. Its own thing. How strongly are we on this? Could I convince you guys otherwise? I think it's bourbon. I truly do. I haven't heard of filtering being a thing that adds something. Usually, if you filter it, well, but is filtering adding something, or is it reducing something? All it says is for bourbon, you can't add something. I mean, it's made with water. So, I mean, molecularly, I suppose it's the same. But if that's the case, though, Chris, so if we're saying is it made with the same water, well, then if bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States, do they have to ship in the water from, say, Kentucky? I don't think it does, Kathy. But speaking of that, I'll tell you right now. I just had a bourbon. So I selected the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select. This one comes in at 94 proof for 47%. Now, because it's a single barrel, the old Forester one that I have for a single barrel was pretty easy to find. I think this one, um, maybe I got lucky and there was enough of them around and it was popular enough to actually pull a good nose, taste, and finish. But with the Jack Daniels, um, because it's single barrel, and I don't know if anyone has done multiple reviews, there was no way for me to pull like a bottle or the rick house it was on or anything like that. So I just went and found what I could find and then based it off of what I've tasted. So it's a little combo of both because if anyone out there has had it before, I didn't want it to just be my interpretation. So uh, the banana caramel peanut, the brown sugar toffee, and hints of spice. For me, it is definitely on the sweeter side, so I'll attribute that over to that brown sugar and toffee, um, molasses and honey. That's kind of where I'm thinking it is. It does have a little bit of spice on there, which I'm not really sure where that comes from. Other than it's not even a very high proof, but it is good. Has anyone had this before? The single barrel? Very nice. Okay. I haven't been able to find one of their single barrel proofs. But this is a very smooth whiskey. I will say, for all the nose that you get, all that spice, it really is just a really mild sweetness. For me, I didn't get any peppery kicks or anything like that. It's very kind of mellow. You get, yeah, I can see some like nuttiness in there, a little bit of, I would probably go on the edge of molasses more than honey. Ooh, very nice. Well, next time I'm up in Massachusetts, I'll have to go hunting for some and bring some back down with me. All right. So, Tennessee whiskey. So, as everyone was migrating, so keep in mind that during that 1791 rush out of the North to kind of find their own way and avoid taxation, um, Tennessee whiskey as well as bourbon, they kind of got, uh, involved in the same areas, right? So, they were moving on. Their distilling practices kept going. They moved to corn as well. Um, but Tennessee whiskey, being that it needs to be produced in Tennessee, also changed kind of the way that they were doing things. So in the picture over, that I have posted, you have Jack Daniels as well as his original group of distillers. You'll notice one man in there, also referred to as Uncle Nearest. They also have a whiskey, to commemorate his memory. I'm not sure if anyone's had any Uncle Nearest before, um, but he was actually the one that uh, introduced the what would eventually become the Tennessee whiskey that we all know and enjoy today. So he actually taught Jack Daniels of uh, the process of one distillation, but also introduced him to what would become that Lincoln County process. So much like how bourbon is restricted to certain production, Tennessee whiskey also has to follow all of those legal requirements of bourbon, but it also has that addition of that county process. Very good. So have some people that have tried Uncle Nearest and read the book. Excellent. Nice. All right. So I've mentioned Lincoln County process like twice. You guys probably wondering what it is. So this is that process of charcoal mellowing through by filtering the whiskey that's produced through the sugar maple charcoal before it goes through aging. So they distill it, they filter it, and then they barrel it, and then it goes into its aging. Um, so this began in the early 1800s in Tennessee. The process was created by Nathan Nearest Green, who became a master distiller for the original Jack Daniels distillery. Um, he actually taught Jack Daniel all of the art of whiskey making. Jack is the one that coined it as the Lincoln County method, or process rather, because that's where the distillery was at the time. There's a lot of history in this, and so I'm condensing it down a lot. But if it wasn't for this random happenstance, we wouldn't actually have Tennessee whiskey. So bourbon isn't typically finished. So when they're referencing single barrel, right? So that comes obviously that's from a single. They go into the rick house, they grab a barrel, they bottle that barrel, and that is a single barrel. Most of the time that you're drinking uh, a bourbon, it can actually be a blend. So it can be for multiple years. Generally speaking, it's over 4 years. But no, usually it'll be aged in the same barrel, and then when they actually go to bottle it, they'll they'll do blends. Think like your small batches. All right, that's a good question. Maybe I will. I mean, if I'm up there already, I may as well. All right. So now we're getting into everyone's favorite time in American whiskey history, the Prohibition. So I actually have a pretty cool bottle of whiskey. Uh, I don't know if it's super hard to find. I think you can find it online relatively simply. Finding it out in the wild, I've never seen it. So this is called the Cotton Club Rye. It's by Chicken Cock. It's aged for 20 years. So now this is a bit of a change since this is not actually an American whiskey. For what? For which? Wait, for chicken cock? I actually don't know. I think I've looked it up before. They were originally around in Paris, Kentucky, back in 1856. So I know that they were kind of one of the original distilleries in Kentucky. But other than that, I don't think I've ever actually learned how they got their name. To be honest with you, I'll have to look that up. And well, maybe after we have our discussions, maybe I'll look it up real quick. But the cool part about this particular whiskey, and the reason why I brought it in is because it's appropriate to talk about prohibition with this particular whiskey. So once prohibition happened, and the Chicken Cock Distillery actually had to shutter its doors down here, they moved their production up to Canada. Um, so the whiskey that they were producing up there was actually being smuggled back down into the States at the time, and they were smuggling it in tin cans, not unlike this, probably less flashy and less labeled, but same concept. And so they were shipping down their whiskeys illegally and smuggling them into the States. And the whiskey itself became known as the whiskey in a tin can. That's what it was famously known as. Um, the reason why it's called Cotton Club Rye is because there was a speakeasy in Harlem, New York, that actually had this as uh, their house whiskey. So they actually had the Cotton Club Rye as their house whiskey. And so, for those of you who know or don't know, Cotton Club was a very famous speakeasy, and Duke Ellington and his orchestral band actually played there quite frequently. So, it's Canadian, mostly rye based. I, you know, I think so. It would make sense. I mean, I'm sure they make a bourbon style whiskey. They can't call it bourbon because they're not part of the United States. But if they become part of the United States, they can call it bourbon. I actually have a couple of. I have that one. Three Fingers High. Has anyone ever had that one? That's a Canadian whiskey. Crown is obviously a Canadian whiskey. But this one is actually a lot sweeter. So I know earlier with American Rise, they're a lot more on the spice forward. They're pretty spicy on the nose. They're pretty spicy on the palate. This one in particular, it's a lot lighter in notes. A lot more kind of on the sweet side. You do get a little bit of that citrus in there. I've always It was funny. I was thinking about that like earlier this week, and I was like, rye to me is like the IPA of beers, but for whiskey. It usually has that kind of like spice. It has more of the citrus notes. So I always think of it like that. I laughed. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. No, it cannot. Once whiskey is in the bottle, it no longer ages. Unfortunately, it's not like wine. We can't keep getting it. It doesn't get better. I know, right? It is a bummer, especially since it usually sits around for another couple of years. But the flavor profile on this one, you do get a little bit of the rye spice. It's nowhere near as strong as the Heaven Hill. I mean, this one's obviously it's only 100 proof. There's just about 30 proof points different, but it's definitely not as in your face. It's more of like a subtle, very smooth spice that kind of rolls on. Um, to me, the finish doesn't last super long. It kind of goes into that buttery uh, kind of mouthfeel with a little bit. So it's oily, I guess you could say, and it does have a little bit of molasses. Um, no, I would not go that it's as sweet as a honey whiskey by any means. Well, thank you, Marie. I don't know if that's why they selected it, but I'll go with that. That sounds good.
Um, Travis, can you
Yeah.
read what Marie said, so just so that everybody knows, because it
Oh
only.
yeah. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. So Marie said Google AI says that chicken cock is an old-fashioned term for a rooster. It's a symbol of strong will and defiance. It was common to name whiskey with animal or bird names. Thank you, Marie. Sorry, I didn't realize that, Mina. All right. So prohibition. So this is one of those things that got a movement going long before it actually became law. So the temperance movement started in the 1830s and started building momentum through the early 20th century. So we got into the 20th century, the whiskeys was kind of moving along. There was I think we had some pretty solid established names, Jack Daniels being among them, Old Forester, Michter's, which wasn't Michter's back then. It was known as something else. I can't quite remember. But there was a lot of prevalent distilleries that were booming across the country. So with this, in 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified and it banned alcohol, and that was no good for anybody because, you know, who doesn't like good whiskey every once in a while? It was actually the Volstead Act that provided that legal framework for enforcing the 18th Amendment. Uh, for thankfully for us, Prohibition lasted only until 1933, where the 21st Amendment was ratified on December 5th, 1933, thus repealing the 18th Amendment and allowing folks to drink again. Now, this didn't really change much because during Prohibition era, of course, organized crime looked to make a buck off of the people who still wanted to have a good time. Hence, why speakeasies were such a prevalent thing during that period of time. Um, and they would smuggle in and allow people to keep partying. That's a good point, Hobbit. It is interesting how politicians and their vices that they actually were able to pass the 18th Amendment, but they did. So yeah, the bootlegging was really a big problem back then, and it stretched law enforcement super thin. And so honestly, I think it was rooted in a maybe good idea that was poorly executed. And so what it ended up doing was uh, putting a hurt on the country from a uh, judicial standpoint, because basically everyone was breaking the laws all the time. The police forces were always stretched thin because of all the illegal bootlegging, as well as all the organized crime that was running rampant at the time because of this massive hole in the market that was no longer being basically properly maintained by legal production of alcohol. But thankfully, that's the end of that. So, just wanted to kind of do a quick coverage of the different types of whiskey. So the main types are our rye whiskeys, our bourbon whiskeys, and our Tennessee whiskeys, which we covered. Items that I didn't cover, so I kind of put it into the American whiskey category. Technically, rye, bourbon, and Tennessee whiskey are all American whiskeys, but there's a lot of types out there, like your single malts, your corn, or your wheat. Um, so single malt's obviously just a whiskey made from a single malt or cereal grain. Corn has to be 80% corn in order to be considered a corn whiskey. And then wheat, you can have like wheated rye, wheated bourbons. That's just adding in a larger portion of wheat uh, to your corn mash. And that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Hopefully that was fun. Hopefully still drinking some good whiskeys. And if you have any questions.
Thank you, Travis. I am so impressed with our audience and their knowledge of of their whiskey
Yeah.
and the history. So, yeah, if you all want to have any questions, feel free to put them either in the chat, which goes by kind of quickly, or the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen. Travis, did you answer the question about the JD single malt, single barrel select? Does that mean bourbon is more than 4 years old, is finished in multiple barrels over the less than 4 years?
Yes, I believe I did. Let me
Okay.
scroll back up.
Yep. Nope.
I just want to make sure. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yes, I see it. So yeah, I did. I answered that one
Okay, great.
from Mary Lou. Yep.
And then Michael says, or asks, do you think that the gray market is hurting the industry, and do you think that there should be laws passed to restrict it?
Um, I think. Well, I think it will. But actually, you know what? I'm going to take that back. I think there should be laws restricting it. Um, I mean, that's why we put in laws around our bourbons, right? Around our bottled and bonds is to keep certain poor quality from getting in there. And I think if you allow the that gray market, right, it'll start actually taking away from the quality of the main distillers, and you start seeing all these little pop-ups that are, you know, just reproducing what someone else has. I think we need to have some control around that.
Mm. And Alex asks, with Scotch, you get a wide variety of malt and grain spirits. Does that happen with American whiskey as well?
A wide variety of malt and grain spirits. Well, I mean, yes. Technically, unless it is a single malt, all of these will contain corn, barley, rye, wheat. So all of these, yeah, they contain a lot of different grains.
So, Gabrielle, there are no dumb questions. And I was
Oh,
also going to ask, what is a gray market?
so the way that I interpreted that question and the way that I understand it, it's the tertiary parties that are basically flooding the market. They can buy pre-distilled product, slap a label on it, call it their own. That's what I look at it as the gray market. But
Mm-hmm.
I might be wrong. I don't know if who was it that asked that question originally?
Gabrielle. Oh,
Gabrielle.
the first question. That
Okay.
was, sorry, Michael.
Oh yeah, Michael. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit further back.
Michael wants to confirm. That's how I interpret it. That's how I interpret.
Okay.
Okay.
So while we wait for some more questions, I wanted to follow up on that a little bit. Is you know how like they have the draft not the draft but the all the different IPAs and all the different beers and wines and things like that that not wines beers, craft beers and hard ciders and things like that. Those a lot of that creativity came from home brewers. So when I think about the gray market, isn't there a place for it?
I mean, well, so it looks like Carmen's correcting and saying it's unauthorized trading. So if that's truly what it is unauthorized trading, then you're talking about basically secondary markets or tertiary markets running up the cost of whiskeys, which I think should be outlawed because that's what causes things to go crazy. If it comes to for me, I think part of the problem is you have like a lot of those smaller. They're getting going. I get it. They're new distilleries. They're getting going in the market. They need product to be able to send out to market, but they aren't old enough to have produced something that's 4 years, right? Or even 2 years.
Mhm.
Uh, so for me, I think, yeah, there's room for them, but I don't know if we need to have as many as we have now because
Mhm.
you end up getting the same product just with a different label on it. And I think that ends up hurting the market. You flood the market with too many options.
Hmm. Well, that makes a lot of sense, though. Like, there's two different things. One is the financial aspect of it, and one is the creativity
Yeah.
aspect of it, which
Yeah.
seems to have meshed. But John says we have a local distillery that makes a millet, oat, and four-grain whiskey along with several rye bourbons. Yum.
That sounds good. I've
Yeah.
never had a millet oat like whiskey before.
Hmm.
Or millet and or I don't know. That sounds good.
I didn't even know
Is it
millet was a grain. So thank you, John.
is it sweet? I gotta ask, is it sweet? Is oat like like a sweeter? I imagine it's beyond like the weeded side of things. That's at least that's how I would imagine it being.
Hmm. Well, I know that oat milk is very sweet. It's got sort of a natural sweet nuttiness to it. So I would be
Yeah.
curious, John. Um, so,
If you've tried it.
so of the four that you gave us today, the rye, the bourbons, what is your favorite? Oh, is I know it's a tough question, probably, but like, what is your favorite to drink on a just like when you're just hanging out with friends?
Uh well, that's it. None of these four is like a regular go-to for me. I love fries. I like the spiciness of fries. Um, but I mean, I don't know. I think yeah, I'll go with rye. I'll go with any rye. Any rye would be my favorite. I know some mentioned bullet ryes in the chats. Um, I like bullet. I don't like necessarily drinking it neat. I prefer that in like an old fashioned, like I'd mentioned earlier. Like that's probably my favorite way to drink that. Now I actually don't remember which one's my rye here. I think it's this one. um, yeah, no, I just really like the spiciness of the ryes. That's my go-to.
So John came back and said that that is just a mellow flavor.
Okay.
Doesn't mention sweet, but what do you remember, Travis? What was the first or early whiskey that you tried that really put you on this path?
Um, sure. Well, actually, I think I remember. I think it was either Beam, Jim Beam, or Jack Daniels number 7. It was one of those two. Um, and I absolutely disliked it. But then I was like, I saw there's other types of whiskey, and I was like, okay, that one might be different. So I tried that because I had Jameson too around that same time.
Mhm.
So I had the Jim Beam, didn't really care for it. I had Jack Daniels, I really didn't care for it. And then I had Jameson. I was like, oh, this tastes different. So I assumed that there was different flavors.
Well, Gabrielle says that Jim Beam reminds her of her parents, and I think that
Oh,
that's part of why we love certain drinks is it has a certain
mhm.
muscle memory to it for us.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot to it. I mean, whiskey itself, I don't think any spirit should just be at your house just drinking them left and right. I think spirits are meant to be enjoyed with your peers, with your friends, people that you want to have around. There's nothing like having a nice whiskey cocktail or even a straight whiskey with friends.
Hmm. And when you were looking up the history, through the Revolutionary War and all, was there anything that surprised you?
Um, it's funny. It's that the whiskey rebellion. I actually didn't realize that was a thing. I don't think I've ever, in all my time knowing about random whiskey facts. I don't think I ever came across that one. And then to learn that it was coming right after we had just kicked England out, and then, and then they're going back in for another tax, and I was like, why would they do that? It seems counterproductive to what we just did.
Hmm. Exactly.
And then another interesting fact that I learned, and I'll share this one, was before whiskey, rum was actually the primary alcoholic beverage of choice. So the British Navy, with their conquests across the globe, uh, they served rum as their primary. So if you've ever heard of having a grog of something, it was rum. Rum was traditional. So the American colonies started drinking rum first.
Hmm.
And,
So
yeah.
Hobbit has this great comment in here. Whiskey can be an acquired taste. I was trained by a crew I work events with who were also Scotch enthusiasts. Once they handed me something that wasn't rot gut, I was like, "Oh, this is good." But where does that word rot gut from? I was sort of like, "Is this liquor like rotting my gut? Is that where it's from?"
If I remember correctly, that's like old English, uh, basically for like swill. It's like poorly produced alcohol. Like that's kind of what it is.
Well, I mean, it's like it definitely evokes that sense of, "Oh, don't drink that."
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Sean Connery endorsed Jim Beam. Maybe. I mean, wouldn't you drink anything Sean Connery drank?
Uh, maybe. I mean, I've drank Jim Beam since. I just, when I was younger, I was like, no, this ain't for me.
I know. I know. Yeah, Sean Connery's more like my gen. But yeah, I would drink anything that he recommends. Teresa says, I do remember that incident from my U.S. history classes. However, I'd forgotten George W. sent in the troops. Um,
Yeah.
But I'm interested a little bit about the prohibition because um, I was told that during prohibition, alcohol sold more than ever because it wasn't allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. When you take away the shiny toy from, that's all you want is that. So, plus, I mean, with it becoming illegal, it was able to be mass produced, regardless of control, right? So, distilleries who were, you know, legally distilling the alcohol, there was a process to it. Once you took away that process and the controls in place that kind of maintained it, then you got swill. You got whatever came out of whatever distillery popped up from wherever it was, right? So yeah, you kind of had a rampant exchange at that point.
Hmm. Rock gut.
Yep, rock gut.
So John asks, have you tried white rye whiskey? It isn't barrel aged and it has a little harsher finish, but it's still a good sipping whiskey.
You're meaning just like unaged.
Mm.
What do they call that? White dog, I think. I've had it before. I don't think it's been specifically white rye, but I've had, white lightning, if you will.
Pat asks, do you have any input about the recent Japanese whiskey craze? And I think this is a really good question because my son is actually out in Japan and Taiwan right now, and he brought home some whiskey from them there last time, and he loved it.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, Japanese whiskey is good. I do enjoy it. Um, when I was first kind of really getting into the podcast, and me and my friend were really driving this and discovering new whiskeys, we actually did an episode on Japanese whiskeys, and I was really kind of let down to find out that the majority of the ones that are readily available to us are actually Scotch that's usually rebranded and blended in Japan and then shipped back over. So I was kind of like, well, that's kind of disheartening. I wanted something that was like truly Japanese. Now we do have truly Japanese whiskeys in the States, but they can be incredibly expensive for what they are. I feel like they're way more overpriced for the same age statements than an American whiskey or even a Scotch or Irish whiskey.
Hmm. So we have some interesting comments about the history. The wives wanted it banned in the 1900s because their husbands came home without their paychecks. I think that happened in a lot of places, Ireland. And Andrew Carnegie played an important role with whiskey during Prohibition. What is that history, Rachel? What was his role? Because I know his role in libraries and things like that, but I didn't know about Prohibition. Do you know, Travis?
No, that's news.
Yep, fill us in.
If Rachel has some cool history knowledge to drop, let's hear
Um, have Japanese whiskeys become so pricey because of the popularity or the actual quality?
it. That's a good question. I Because when I was looking at like the Japanese whiskeys originally, they were still really expensive. I went with Suntory, like it's Jim Beam Suntory, so Beam Suntory now. Um, but I had like a Suntory specific. I can't remember the exact name of the brand, but it was still expensive for what it was. I think it was like 3 years old or 4 years old, and they wanted $70 for it, which is ridiculous in the range of whiskeys and what I was used to then. And even still nowadays, I'd be like, ugh, if I don't know the brand, I don't know if I'd want to spend that much. But the quality, I don't think has ever been bad. Like that's the thing is, it's not like it's bad Scotch that they're blending, and they do the blending there. And sometimes they'll add them into Mizunara casks and age them again and do some stuff with them. But it's not a true Japanese whiskey, and that's really kind of where I'm like, I want if you're going to say it's a Japanese whiskey, I want it to be distilled there with the products from your country, and like I want to actually taste your product, not something you shipped in, blended, and then shipped back out.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You want to get a sense of the culture.
Exactly.
Um, Rachel says that whiskey was used for medicinal purposes, which I've heard that with
Yeah.
most alcohols, right?
Yeah.
Like it can be a disinfectant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, whiskey or alcohol in general was still used. So they could still distill the alcohol without aging it, and then it would still be like rubbing alcohol essentially.
No, which tastes terrible, I'm told. I haven't tried it.
Well, it does now. They poison it intentionally to keep people from drinking it.
It totally makes sense. Well, we are out of time, but Travis, thank you so much for doing this. And I know I'll be in touch with you about possibly doing something again next year because this is so much
Yeah,
fun. Um,
I enjoy it.
yeah, me too. I've learned a lot, and I like I said, wish I wasn't on the clock, but I did drink my water before doing anything. I was like acting like I was in prohibition right now.
Oh,
So
okay.
I appreciate it, you and everybody who's been here and has had their comments and their whiskeys that you've been talking about. I'll try to grab a sense of like what you all were drinking and put it in notes for the recap email I'll send out to everybody. So Travis, thank you so much, and thank you all for
Absolutely.
being here. I hope you all have a nice night and sleep it off.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Good night, everyone.